When the medical world couldn't give her husband the answers he needed after a Parkinson's diagnosis, Martha Carlin didn't just accept it. She rolled up her sleeves and taught herself chemistry, physics, and genetics. She's now a powerhouse in gut science, a TEDx speaker, and a CEO who speaks on how the soil in our gut dictates the health of our lives. From securing $1 million NIH grants to founding the BioCollective, Martha is proving that health isn't a mystery. It's a system that we can fix. Martha, welcome. Great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the talk.
All right, so I'm a naturopath, and gut is our number one place to start. So I'm really looking forward to this too. Let's dive straight in. So the medical world gives us, particularly women, a bit of a pat on the head and says that our health issues are just aging. You refuse to buy into that lie. How did you being like a self-taught scientist, help you find answers with your husband's health that experts were completely missing? How did you do that?
Well, in part, it actually goes back to my original career and training. So I came out of school with a degree in accounting, which is a
Oh,
system.
accounting's like science, 100%.
It's got a balance. The system, the balance sheet has to balance, and it keeps a record of the ins and outs. So that sort of mindset. And then when I came out of school, I was trained as an auditor, and an auditor is trained to never take anything at face value, to examine the evidence for yourself. And so, we get this diagnosis. My husband was 44. He was a healthy, active, marathon running, it just didn't make sense to me. And so I started kind of taking the systems based approach that I had learned in business and looking at the human body. And, the first place I started was food because I thought, okay, what's the main thing that's going through the body? And so I spent a lot of time researching food. And I was very fortunate. About a week after my husband was diagnosed, I had planned a yoga retreat. And at this yoga retreat, there were they were talking about food and food quality, and Weston Price, who is a dentist who had discovered that the Western diet was causing all of our, or many of our health problems. I won't say all of them. And so there was this whole education during the yoga retreat about food. And so I came back and threw everything out of the cabinet and started back to real food and cooking again and focusing on that. And then just steadily built on the pieces as questions started to come up, and would teach myself basically through curiosity of trying to answer a question. And then also just being very observant of my husband and other people with Parkinson's. So as we started to meet other people with Parkinson's, I would ask them, kind of tell me your life story. And what I started to see was these patterns in people's life stories. I mean, they're not all the same. We're all individual, but there were chemical exposures or stressors or dietary problems, issues with how they were fed as a baby, or you could start to see these pieces. And then 12 years into the diagnosis, I read a book called Missing Microbes by Martin Blazer about growing up in the age of antibiotics and the rise in chronic diseases. And that to me was like, oh, what is this microbiome? And it was just starting to come into people's consciousness. So I wasn't so far behind in that field as maybe some of the others. And I just started aggressively reading about the microbiome, reading scientific papers. And later that year, they published the first paper. They showed you could divide the two phenotypes of Parkinson's by specific gut bacteria. And I was like, that's it. I'm all in. I quit what I
Here we
was doing
go. Yeah.
and started funding some research at the University of Chicago, where I met one of the co-founders of the BioCollective. And we said, you could see in the microbiome, we treat things, we label things as individual diseases, but when you go deeper down into that ecosystem in the body, you can see there are a lot of shared loss of function across different health problems. And so that's where the idea of the biocollective and starting to build a bank of people's poop.
Yeah.
So we collected stool samples in a box for 7 years and sequenced them and started to look at patterns and ask questions and then try to understand how might we use what we were learning there to restore restore the gut. But also my chief scientific officer had been a professor of microbial ecology at Cal Poly for about 35 years. And he was a pioneer in using microbes to clean up oil spills. And so
Mhm.
I started talking to him. I said, we're looking at trying to help human health, but we're not going to be able to help human health if we don't also address the problem in the soil and the larger environment. And so we started another company called Ancient Organics Bioscience to do the same thing on the soil and plant and kind of environmental side of cleaning things up with microbes.
Yeah, I love that heaps. I'm a big plant girl, so that was cool. So how quick when you started doing this with your husband, how quick did you start to see even subtle changes with his Parkinson's?
So within just a few months of going to Whole Food and getting rid of some of the things. So he was at the time he had been drinking a soy protein shake from some multi-level marketing
Hmm.
company and drinking a lot of soy milk. And one of the early things I discovered was that was sort of the time frame where the vast majority of soy had now become
GMO.
genetically engineered
Yeah.
GMO and it had a lot of glyphosate on it. And so when we removed that, his tremor actually, he had a tremor in his tongue and a tremor in his pinky, and his tremor was no longer visible.
Mm, yeah.
So that told me, okay, there's something big to this food. And so, I've never stopped looking at glyphosate
Oh,
and genetically engineered food. And even, when I built the microbiome, the stool bank and all the genetic data, I started being able to dig in there and look for specific genes that I knew were engineered into the food. And I could see differences in the presence of those genes in different health situations.
I love that you dig in poop.
Yeah.
Uh, it's really the first question a naturopath asks is we start with poop because it's such a sign of what's going on in your body. So I love that you've been tracking that.
Well, my business card actually has the Bristol stool scale on the back of it.
You're talking my language, woman. I love it.
Well, and in Parkinson's, actually, in our lab, we found that they could not diagnose, but they could tell that someone had Parkinson's just by looking at their stool compared to all the other stools we had collected.
Right. Hmm. All right, so let's bring poop, stools, gut microbiome, all that kind of stuff. Let's bring it to middle-aged women, who's the majority of people who hear this podcast. In a world that throws our health concerns out as just kind of trivial. It's getting better, however, it's still wildly different to where it should be. Um, what have you found that influences or that we can tell women about how that gut bacteria is hijacking our hormones, specifically more in midlife?
So, actually, I don't know if I like hijacking because
Give me another word. Yeah.
it's a two-way street.
Influencing. Yeah, go
Yeah,
on.
influencing. So because it's a two-way street, but when we go through puberty, our microbiome changes. And then when we go into menopause, our microbiome changes again because hormone interaction in the gut also selects for the bacteria that are there. And then a healthy, diverse gut is part of what recycles or not recycles, but tags estrogen that's been used so that can be removed from the body. So if that part of the microbiome isn't working properly, then that estrogen might not get tagged and it will recycle in the body. And constipation can also become more of a problem as we get older. The other thing is there's an area that I've been doing a lot of work on lately, and I'm working on a paper, is a lot of the cleaning compounds that we are exposed to, and women do, frankly, a lot more of the cleaning. Those cleaning compounds disrupt the microbiome and they disrupt the membranes in the body and they're immunosuppressive. So it's kind of like this triple whammy that, and it's cumulative because some of them have about a nine month life in the body. So if you're constantly being exposed on a daily basis, then it's building up over time. So not only are your hormones changing as you go into menopause, but you've had this sort of stacked level of exposure to something like the quaternary ammonium compounds. And so that will also affect the gut microbiome. And then the gut, the bacteria in the gut are working with the brain, and the gut and the brain signaling back and forth. That's where a lot of our neurotransmitters are also made. So it's really a complex ecosystem
Mm.
that is, and it also handles how much we react under stress and how much cortisol we produce. So there's a lot of different pieces to the puzzle. So yes, some of the bacteria in your gut can hijack your hormones, but then some of them are really there helping you if they're there. So what I always tell people is you've really got to get your gut straight, because that's one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle
Yeah.
to getting back to normal or feeling normal.
100%. That's exactly the way naturopaths think too. I love it. I love the work you're doing. That's so cool. And we've now got a health reason to not clean. I fucking love it.
Yeah.
You just gave all the women in the world permission to go, no, because it's messing with our midlife hormones. Don't do it. Don't clean. Clean natural. That's the thing. Yeah.
Well, I learned from, so the scientist in Australia that I'm doing some of this work with, the paper we're working on, um, he actually told me one of the anecdotal ways that they discovered how some of these compounds were working, and in particular affecting women, was with cervical cancer. So there was a rise in cervical cancer with the use of spermicides, which work in the same manner on the membranes. And once they discovered that and they stopped using the spermicides, the rate of cervical cancer dropped.
Yeah. Shit that's been done to us over the years, eh?
Crazy stuff.
It is. We just a life close to nature is the solution, and we keep looking for shortcuts that cause us mental stuff over time. Yeah. So what would you say to women listening who feel like it's too late? I'm whatever age and it's too late to turn my gut around. I've got a busy life managing career, family stuff. It's too hard. What would you
It's
say?
Yeah, it's never too late to turn your
Mm.
gut around. I really believe if you, even if we look outside in nature at some of the devastation we've done to natural ecosystems, when you let them, you ease up on the exposures that they're getting and let the system sort of reestablish an equilibrium. I mean, there's a beautiful example up in Lake Superior that was very toxic. It's called the Apostle Islands. And 50 years now hence, it's totally restored and just beautiful. So, yes, you have to take personal responsibility and action for what you're putting in your body. And it's not always easy. So it's not always easy to take that first step. But I think once people take a step or two and they start to see how much better they feel, then it's easier to take that next step. You don't have to do everything all at once.
Mm. Agree. Same as like if we haven't gone to the gym for a while, those first few days are just not fun.
Yeah,
And we get into the throes of it. So eating closer to nature, throwing out the crap and processed foods as a place to start is a viable starting place.
it is. It
Yeah.
is.
And I was just thinking during COVID, we saw it a lot here when, everyone was bloody locked up. That even our beaches where a lot of people four-wheel drive, they couldn't, they weren't allowed. It was all locked down. And the beaches replenished. Like it was amazing when we just let things rest and do what they're meant to do. Yeah, nature knows,
Yeah,
how
the
to
birds came
restore.
back here in Denver. Just the bird populations that spring, you could see so many more birds and hear them that weren't there
Wow.
previously. So it's an ecosystem just like what we see on the outside. And if we pay attention, I mean, I think part of the problem is we're not paying attention to our own ecosystem. And, if you start to just listen to your body, it's telling you something. Or,
Mm.
I tell people your poop is telling you something. I mean,
Oh,
it's, one of the most important signals that you have. And
yep.
humans have sort of, they flush it down the toilet and don't think
They
about it.
won't look.
But
But
they
look
won't
at
look.
every poop. It's so important.
But if you have a pet, people are picking up their dog poop every day and they use that as the barometer of how their dog is doing. So that's one of the examples I've used with people a lot is like, do you have a dog? You're looking at if your dog's not going every day, you think something's wrong. Well, the same thing is true for us.
All right. So with your hat on, I'm interested compared to my naturopath hat. Tell us about poop. How many times a day should we poop to have healthy gut microbiome?
Well, you need to go at least once a day.
Yeah.
So if you think about, well, the way I sort of think about it though, you're putting food in, you're digesting it, and then there's some waste which should come out. And then you put more food in and there's some more waste and it should come out. But so, 2 to 3 times a day would not be a problem. And I do know a number of practitioners that I work with. If they're doing any kind of a detoxification protocol, they want somebody going 3 times a day because you've got to get that waste out because it sits in the body. And just like the estrogen can recycle, the toxins from the waste sitting in your body can recycle. And that, I believe, is one of the drivers in Parkinson's, actually.
Mm. Yeah, as a naturopath, we say if you're having 2 to 3 meals a day, you should be pooping 2 to 3 times a day. Yeah. I remember a guy when I was in my clinic days had just the worst psoriasis I'd seen. And we use Iris's diagnosis. I'm looking at his eyes, I'm looking at his skin, and I went, "Oh, yeah, you poo, you poop regularly?" Or we say poo. You poo regularly? And he went, "Yeah, I poo regularly." And I'm looking at his eyes, I'm looking at his skin. I thought, fuck, mate, you don't shit. And he went, "Yeah, I do. Every Thursday." And for him, that was regular. So I think the dog analogy is brilliant because people do. They clean their cat and their dog's, poop up. It's a great way to notice what's going on and when they're off. Or if they do a
Well,
runny bum, there's something going on.
yes, I've talked about this swipe test too. Like you want a clean swipe.
No punamis.
Yes. Actually, I have a book that should be available on Amazon in about a week called My Search for the Perfect Poop. And it's just
You've written
sto-
it?
yes, it's stories
Oh, love it.
about these signals and things that it's giving, but it's through real life stories. And it goes back to all the way back to my childhood because my mother actually, when I was 4, went to Mexico and got sick while she was in Mexico, and she never really got well. So she had irritable bowel. Back then they called it spastic colon for her
Mm.
whole life, but she about 12 years later was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Shortly after that, multiple sclerosis. Those two have both been connected to the gut. And then she had thyroid cancer and breast cancer. And all of these pieces have connections to what's going on in the gut. And so in writing the book, I was going back, I was like, okay, my life's been about poop since, I was 8 years old, standing outside the stall door, waiting for my mother.
Oh, okay. So say the title again so everyone can track down your book.
My search for the perfect poop.
That's the best title. That's going to be a hit. I love it. And that's a TED talk in itself. You need to pitch that one.
Yeah.
All right, Queen of Poop. Tell me about fecal transplants.
That was actually one of the first things I found when I went to the first microbiome conference I think it was like 2015. I went to this microbiome conference, and this company called Rebiotics was working on a fecal transplant material where they could standardize it and get it through the FDA. And I was like, what is this? And so started looking into that. And of course, yellow soup, which was the Chinese used baby poop to make a soup, 4,000 years ago to help with GI problems. Well, then there was this whole trend when we first started collecting stools of these biohackers who were trying to figure out their own gut problems and find somebody to get to give them their poop. And so they would send us their samples to sequence. And I saw out of that actually that's maybe not the best idea, just going out and randomly find somebody to give you their poop because they may not be healthy.
Mhm.
But a company, or it was a nonprofit, was started here in the States called Open Biome, where they were screening people to be healthy donors. And this was one of the most amazing things is only 3% of the people that they were screening qualified as being healthy enough to donate. So that tells you a lot about what's going on. And more recently, I had a conversation with somebody who works with a company that's been studying fecal transplants in cancer. And they had, I think it was within 2 weeks of the fecal transplant in the cancer patients, between 42 and 55% reduction in tumor size in just 2 weeks with a fecal transplant. So that tells you the microbes are running the show. And, there's been a lot of regulatory movement in one direction or another, more toward making it harder to get a fecal transplant than it was back at the beginning when it was sort of the wild, wild west, because GI docs were able to get fecal transplant material from Open Biome and do a transplant. And they were able to do transplants from a family member or things like that. And they started to crack down and make it more difficult. But if you think about how a fecal transplant, if it was able to cure cancer, I mean, that's boom, a whole industry gone. So it's actually
Don't start me on the thing about cancer and treatments. There's so much money at stake. They'll never
right.
release true cures.
Well, and that's been one of my arguments about Parkinson's is it's an industry, and I tell people with Parkinson's, you're the market.
Yeah.
Uh, but there was an Australian, Tom Borody, who was really a pioneer in fecal transplants, and he did a large number of fecal transplants in people with Parkinson's over the years. And he had some that were very successful and some that were not as successful. And I don't know what his method was, but recently there were two different studies in Europe, one in Belgium and one in Finland. And the one in Finland came from the bottom up, and the one in Belgium came from the top down. And the one from the top down was more successful. The one from the bottom up was not successful in terms of changing any significant markers. And I think that's because what one of the underappreciated things is the problem is in the small intestine.
Mm.
So you can see signals in the stool and what's going on there, but that's what's coming out of the colon. There's a whole lot of action going in the small intestine where the fecal bacteria has migrated up into the small intestine where it shouldn't be.
Mm.
And so by doing a fecal transplant from the top down, or there's a Canadian company, uh, I don't know what they call their product, but I affectionately called it crapsules because they're actually making fecal transplant capsules.
Crapsules. I love it. So, as naturopaths, we see a lot of people with ileocecal valve um, faults, so to
Yep.
speak. And so that's, for those listening, the ileocecal valve is kind of like the gateway between small and large intestine. So if that's not playing the game, that can be part of how that bacteria is getting back to the small intestine.
Yes. And that's also going to get dysregulated with a damaged glycocalyx, because the glycocalyx is a good part of where that signal gets propagated for the closing and opening and peristalsis and all that movement.
Mm, there's so much in it. I love it. Poop transplants. Go the Aussies. They've been had a part in helping to lead it too. That's cool.
Yeah.
You know, some people probably say you've got a bit of a shit of a job sometimes, but I fucking love what you do.
I know. Well, when my kids were in college and I was doing, they're all out now, but when they were in college and, they would say, "Oh, yeah, my mom's the poop queen." It's kind of embarrassing. But
Mm.
now they're kind of proud of me.
I've got friends who say, "Can we just have dinner tonight without you talking about poo?" Because it's just
Yeah.
it's it. And you know, as far as naturopaths think, it's the
Yeah,
place to start.
it is. It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, I love it. All right. So I love that you talk about the connection that our health's only as good as the soil that we come from. Here at home, I grow so much of our veggies and bits and pieces. I'm all about organic gardening and just buy the bits I really have to out of season, around at the shops. And again, with a life that's busy for a lot of people, how do you think people can get back to those basics to the earth to fix our internal dirt, which is influenced so much from the foods that we're buying that can be just nutrition void and toxic loaded? What?
Well, I don't know about in Australia, but here in the US,
Oh, we copy all your shit.
we do have more of a movement of local farmers markets in the last decade. Those have been increasing, and getting to know your farmer and community supported agriculture where you can find a farmer and get a, a box of veggies every week, depending on what's coming up seasonal. And I do talk to people also about how food is information, and it's information about the environment that you are in. So stop buying strawberries from California if you live, you know, in Kentucky or
Mm.
York, because that's different information. And you shouldn't be eating something that is available 365 days a
Out of
year now.
season.
You should be
Yeah.
eating with the season because it's giving you information about the light and the nutrients and everything in your environment. So, as much as possible, I try to tell people to find local food sources, because the other thing that does, it not only gives you a direct relationship with who's growing your food and knowing how they grow it, but it also helps rebuild the community structures that we have lost because of the way we have moved in this industrialized agricultural system. And I love Wendell Berry is a author here in the States. He's in his 80s now, but he was writing about how the shift in the way we do agriculture back in the 1970s was going to destabilize our communities. And that's exactly what it's done. So if you don't have a place to grow something, you can still get a pot. You can grow a few things in a pot, which I think just the relationship you have with growing something and
Mm.
eating something that you've grown is also an important piece of the puzzle, that we've lost how life comes out of the ground. And I mean, it's pretty amazing when you see a little seed and you plant it in the ground and it starts to come out, and the next thing you know, it's multiplying and feeding you so much that you have to start giving away your zucchinis to the neighbor.
Yeah, that's well at the moment it's we're in the peak of summer and so not much grows where I live because it's just too hot in summer. So I've got beans in as a rotation crop because they put nitrogen back in the soil. But those little buggers, they grow 3 inches a day. And I
Yeah.
get so much delight going out in the morning to the afternoon to going, oh, go the beans. And I get sometimes that food is cheaper to buy it from the supermarket. However, like we're harvesting figs at the moment, and there's no comparison to the flavor, to anything, to what we get in the supermarkets. Yeah, I encourage people, even if they live in an apartment, have a pot with a tomato plant in it. Get something.
Well, tomatoes are those are one of the things that the industrial food system has really ruined, because
Ah,
I grew up in Kentucky where, you could spit a seed on the ground and you'll have a beautiful plant. And the tomatoes there are just incredible. The flavor, and I grew up eating them like apples. I would eat so many that the acid would kind of mess with my mouth. But a tomato in the store has no flavor, because what they've done is they've engineered out the flavor and the smell, because those are the compounds that actually break down faster. And so when you remove those, the food will last longer, but it
looks
has none
pretty.
of the, it looks pretty, but it has none of the vitality that is really what is contributing to our health.
Yeah, the pretty bit doesn't feed us. The
No.
nutrients do. Yeah. Can I ask about gut microbiome with because I do a lot of work up in Asia and follow a lot of traditional Chinese medicine thinking. So we're big on pungents being prebiotic. So, your garlic, onions, leeks, all those kind of things. From a food source, if you had to think of like prebiotic, probiotic, postbiotic, what are some basic foods that people should be getting in their diet of a day that's helping to feed those microbiome?
So you do want those like your garlic, onion, the inulin type polyphenols. So that's where the color comes in. You want things with color. Olive oil, that's going to have, if you get good quality olive oil, it should have sort of a peppery flavor to it, which it will tell you it has more of the polyphenol content. You know, your basic fibers, you want soluble and some insoluble fiber, but soluble fiber, I think I like soluble fiber better. But
What's your favorite soluble fiber?
oh, um, well, I went for a long time doing this fiber blend that I used to make for breakfast, and I'm getting ready to go back to it. So I made a blend of acacia fiber, uh, arabinogalactin, uh, let's see, inulin, cocoa powder. Uh, yeah, see, people don't think about cocoa powder being a fiber.
Not as fiber.
It
Interesting.
is a fiber, and so those I had, and something called XOS, which feeds bifidobacteria. So I had made this
Biff and
specific
gulp. Biff, yeah.
concoction,
Yeah.
selecting different bacteria to feed, and kind of did an experiment around that. So I do like the acacia fiber, um, but
So what's the main, so all right. So in layman's terms, five top foods to feed gut microbiome for fiber.
greens,
Greens,
greens.
bitter greens more, like your kales and arugula, as you call it. We say rocket.
I like dandelion greens. That's a
Oh,
bitter green. Yeah,
oh my
dandelion.
God, yeah. Dandelion, they people here, it's a weed. And yet it's in my world, it's one of the most valuable greens.
Well, because it's a fabulous detoxifier.
Oh,
It's You can't kill a
supportive for liver.
dandelion, and
Yeah,
that's because it has all the those great detoxifiers.
yeah,
Like ginger.
yeah.
Ginger is it's great on so many levels because it has so many different compounds. Garlic, another one that's just a great tool. Now, some people have sulfur problems though, and you can get sulfur bacteria in the gut if you're out of balance. There's actually a bacteria called Desulfovibrio, and some of us are being exposed to that through wastewater treatment, and it's in the water supply. But if you're having sulfur trouble, you might not want to have sulfur type things until you sort of address that problem in your gut. Um,
Which is the garlic and onions.
yeah, I
Yeah.
used to like oatmeal because it has some really nice fibers in it. But here in the States, so much of the oatmeal is dried down with glyphosate. And I learned one of the reasons why they're doing that is they've moved to, not all of the farms have their own combines now. And so they have these companies with big combines. And so they have to basically schedule their crop harvesting. So they spray everything so that it all dries at once so that they can schedule the combine to come in and get it all and be done with it. Whereas when they used to have their own harvesting equipment, they would just harvest as it dried naturally in the field.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big fan of oats, but I buy organic Australian oats. Yeah, it's so wrong, isn't it?
And I think that's one of the main reasons that so many people have trouble with grains and legumes now
Yeah.
is that both grains and legumes are dried down with glyphosate. And so we have this, people want to try to eat more fiber. Well, beans are, the beans and legumes are great fiber, but if they're dried down with glyphosate, you
Mm.
know, you're it's a maybe not so much.
Yeah, so for the Aussies listening to this, it's Roundup is the most common source of that. If that Aussies think of, if we say that instead of glyphosate, they get what it is. I know it's just used endlessly. It's
Well, and they just last week President Trump signed an executive order basically declaring it a national security that we have access to glyphosate to protect our food supply. I was
where
like,
everywhere
okay,
else in
well,
the world is banning it.
it's like, okay, what about our health? Isn't
Yeah,
that a national security issue?
yeah. Money talks.
Very
Yeah.
frustrating.
So thinking about President Trump, mental health. Tell me the link between, sorry, I had to do that. Tell me the link between um, gut and mental health. That gut-brain axis is a very big
Well,
thing. And we've seen such a rise on mental health issues the last, since COVID particularly.
so back to the quaternary ammonium compounds, those cleaning compounds,
Yeah.
the amount of hand sanitizers and
Oh,
countertop sprays and things that went exponentially up since COVID. And there's actually a couple of research papers out now kind of raising the alarm about the amount of that found in the blood post COVID. And that's going to damage your microbiome. And there's this, those neurotransmitters are in your gut. And also, serotonin is made in your gut.
yeah.
And tryptophan, the tryptophan we don't we either have to get tryptophan from food we eat or from the microbes making it in our gut. And tryptophan is made in a pathway called the shikimate pathway by microbes and plants. And that pathway is the specific target of Roundup or glyphosate. So that gets disrupted. So you have this disrupting the amino acids that are required for making those neurotransmitters. So you have it's kind of like a triple whammy, really. There's a group at University College Cork in Ireland that have been really the pioneers of the gut-brain axis and neurotransmitters and starting to treat depression with probiotics.
Yeah.
Um, Ted Dinan and Ted's now retired, but John Cryan is kind of the voice of all of this work out of Cork. And they have a book called The Psychobiotic Revolution, which I recommend to people because it does have the science in there if you want more of the science, but they do speak to you in layman's terms and lay out some plans for how to care for your microbiome and for how to start to look at what you're putting in your body and what that's having an effect on your brain.
Wow. Thank you. I hadn't made the link between bloody hand sanitizer. I'd missed that one. That's huge.
Now, if you use an alcohol-based sanitizer, you're okay. Alcohol's okay, but
Yeah.
it's the ones that are, have the other compounds in them. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
or if it says kills 99%, that's probably a bad one. Or, lasts for a long time on your surface. You don't want your count because if you think about that, two people are cleaning their countertops with this stuff. And then, they're out laying the food out on the counter. And it's like, no, use vinegar, water,
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%. Wash your bloody hands.
yeah.
Spoken word. I agree. I agree. Oh my gosh. So how do we tell our gut to be able to adapt to what's going on? we've got to come back to the basics. Reality is most people are not going to. Sadly, 80% are still going to do the quick fix. How can we support our gut to adapt to what's going on nowadays? Do you think we can?
Well, we can to some degree.
Mm,
But if you're going to continue to make choices to eat processed food,
yeah.
if you make that choice, it's going to be very difficult for you to have a healthy microbiome. It's just, you're not giving it the material it needs to build a healthy body.
Yeah.
And we are 2 times more microbial than we are human. So if you care about yourself, you have to care about your microbiome.
Yeah.
And, I'm not saying you have to go, plow up the backyard and grow all your food, but you have to make conscious choices about what you're doing, or it isn't possible with the amount of exposure that we have now to have a healthy microbiome.
Yeah. I see people eating shit, highly processed fast food and stuff like that, and then drinking a little probiotic drink thing, thinking, I'm good, I've got healthy microbiome. I'm having my probiotic and I think you got no idea. First, you're not feeding anything to good fibers and everything to the microbiome for them to be able to flourish and multiply. It's like we have to break that pattern.
And, there's also so many different diet crazes
Yeah.
too right now. And it's been interesting because I do talk a lot to people in the ketogenic movement and the carnivore, where people have really good results when they start out. But part of that is, if you have an unhealthy microbiome, you're very likely have endotoxin producing bacteria in your gut, and they feed on fiber just like the good bacteria do. So if you have a lot more of them and you're eating fiber, then you're feeding them as well. And so when people go on a carnivore diet, they will have this die off, which I think is part of what explains the keto flu, is they get this endotoxin, which is also connected to depression, by the way. And then they go for a period of time where there's no fiber in there. So it's dropping down the presence of those endotoxin producing bacteria. But over time, that's detrimental too, because you've gone to this extreme and you've solved some of your problems, but you haven't restored a healthy ecosystem. And so I have started talking more to people in that arena about trying to move more back into looking at fiber. And I know there's, I think he's known as the meat doctor, but he started adding back fruit to get that fiber because, and you have, juice is one thing, like you're drinking a
You
lot of
need the
sugar.
fiber.
But if
Yeah.
you eat that whole fruit,
Yeah.
the system and the bacteria, they're getting that fiber, so the good bacteria are being fed. So like I tell people, like, don't be afraid of fruit, just don't eat fruit out of season and don't eat fruit all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, we think so alike. I love it. I love that you've got all the chunky science to back up all the shit that my brain just thinks. Mm.
You have a
It's
smart brain.
well, I'm a traditionally trained naturopath and herbalist, and so it's just the closer we are to nature, the more our body works. And if you don't look after the core of your being, the rest just doesn't work. Our gut is a total reflection of what's happening. We talk about context. What's happening outside's influencing our inside, and our inside, our outside. And so if we eat shit, we kill our gut microbiome, we get the health results.
Absolutely.
Keep it simple. Mm.
Eat real food. You've got to eat real food. And
Yeah.
as much as possible, try to eat organic. I know it's not always easy to find, or sometimes
Mm.
it's more expensive, but you're paying a price one way or the other.
Yeah. And the price is more long term if you're trying to fix things. And so many people nowadays are just doing band-aids, band-aids, band-aids. This symptom's come up, this one's come up. And so then, but band-aids fall off. At some stage, we need to reset what's happening, go behind the symptom, which is totally what you did with your husband. And and correct some of that to get long-term changes in health.
Well, so I've been talking more too about how the microbiome is kind of a buffering system. So if you have a healthy microbiome, you can handle a little bit more swing
Yeah.
in what's going on. But if you don't have a healthy microbiome and you don't have that healthy glycocalyx that coats everything, then you don't have a healthy buffering system. And so your bandwidth of what you can tolerate is gets narrower and narrower. And then the more band-aids that people put on, the bigger the swings are because they're like, oh, I'm missing this. Let me dump a bunch of this in, and it swings back the other way. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, that was too much, or it's just this constant battle on the teeter-totter, where if you have a healthy gut, it's sort of helping
Yeah.
kind of keep us more of a sway than a big pendulum swing.
Yeah, and nowadays on social media, there's the new bestest, cleverest thing every week that people and they're band-aiding the arse off stuff and creating more problems. Where if we don't, I love that you're talking to just get that foundation right. And like you say, then we won't sway as far. Yeah. If you could get on your soapbox about anything right now, what would you want to speak into that you haven't spoken into yet?
Oh, that I haven't spoken into.
Mm.
Well, speaking up and speaking out. We've been so quiet for so long about all the things that are happening to us. We're afraid, and out of COVID, people got afraid to talk to each other, afraid to offend somebody because we have a different opinion. So, a healthy gut ecosystem, a healthy community ecosystem, it revolves around give and take. Like if everybody thought the same way, if every microbe did the same thing, we would have nothing. So we've got to get back to where it's we can speak to each other and and talk about the problems that we're facing in honest language that's not confrontational, that doesn't make people feel like we're attacking them. Um, and and we've got to listen. We've got to listen to the other side because that's the other thing, over the course of this 25 years I've learned is listening. Listen to what people are saying. And I learned that from Parkinson's patients who told me their doctors never listen to what they're saying. Men and women both, but even more so women. So that's what I would get on my soapbox about.
That's you hit so many markers on that. I always ask that question. I never know what's going to come out. That's huge. Thank you. I agree. I agree. Wow. If you could go back to your 18-year-old self with the wisdom that you have today, what would you whisper in your own ear?
Oh, I don't think I would go back and whisper anything to my, because I think my journey, it would, if I whispered something in my ear, it might have changed my journey. And as difficult as the path has been, I have deep gratitude for the path I've walked, for what I learned from my husband, for what we shared together and brought into the world to help people with Parkinson's. And I don't think I would go back and change anything.
Yeah, his Parkinson's has brought great gifts to the world, not just the Parkinson's community, but your knowledge. I'm excited to have been able to speak to you this morning. That you speak my language big time.
It's always great to connect with somebody who thinks in a holistic way about what
Yeah.
we're facing.
Yeah. And we either get our shit together and thrive, or yeah, our shit's going to take us down not a good place, literally. That
Yeah.
poop, it's a signal. Start looking at your poop, everybody. So you use the Bristol poop chart is your favorite tool. It's on your business card, obviously, to identify how your health is.
Yes. Well, I do that just to get a little rise out of people, but also it's a good conversation starter to talk about, what is healthy poop? What's it telling, and if you're on either end of that extreme, if people don't know what that is, it's a scale of 1 to 7 from hard to super runny, and you want to be in the middle in the peanut butter zone. That's about a
Hold
3 or 4.
together, but not be
Yeah.
nuggets. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the best visual. I love it. All right. Well, your poop book's coming out next week. That's exciting. What's the best place for people to follow you, what you get up to? Check out all you've done, check out your gut microbiome bits and pieces and your poop book and everything. What's the best place for people to follow you?
So there's several places to find me. So I have a probiotics company, and that's BiotiQuest. That's BiotiQuest.com. And I write a blog there where I write about the gut and fermented foods and gut brain axis, all of those pieces of the puzzle. I have a Substack that is Martha's Quest, and I write on larger environmental pieces beyond just, I do write about the microbiome there, but I write on some of these bigger concepts there. And I have a Parkinson's blog, and that is also called that's marthasquest.com.
Love it. Well, I will make sure I put all those links below, everybody. So thank you. I have loved this so much. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate the work you do in the world. I fucking love that you trained yourself. You didn't take no for an answer and you trained yourself when the doctors kept going, nah, nah, nah. Like, I take my hat off to you.
Thank you. Thank you. And to your listeners, you can teach yourself anything. You really can. If you have the desire and the curiosity to answer questions, you can teach yourself anything.
Mic drop. Such a pleasure, Martha. I look forward to following more of your work. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jen.